Hey everyone! Today I'd like to share with you some thoughts about upcycled art. If you are interested in this art form, grab a cup of hot or cold tea, depending on where you live, and join me in this video where I'll chat and you will see me work on various sculptures that fit into the upcycled art theme. So upcycling trash and objects into artworks is something I have grown to do in my own artwork. It's also an interesting way to reduce your ecological impact as an artist while adding meaning and statement to your body of work. And being purely pragmatic, trash or discarded objects are a tremendous source for materials, and free materials on top of that. But before we discuss this a little bit more, I would like to add that I'm going to show you only my very own personal take on upcycled art. If this is something you are interested in, I would highly encourage you to do two things before. The first thing is to play around with objects in your artwork the way you feel is right. I believe art is the very personal view and expression of an artist, and so trying to dig deep inside yourself to find your own voice is critical. I know it's difficult to be very connected with yourself, to touch into your subconscious, but trust me, it will make your work more genuine and unique. The second thing you can do is to look at other artists who do upcycled art. Try to look at that after having thought by yourself. When you look too much at other artists' work, you end up in a dangerous obsessiveness loop. You want to do the same, but you know you can't, so you get stuck. I think we've all been there, obsessing over someone's art and wanting to be at their level and just unable to because we cannot do the same that they do. Another way to get out of that obsessive and unproductive loop is to look at many artists' work. But from my own experience, I find it much easier to avoid scrutinizing others' art and instead find inspiration from the master of all, nature. But first, a bit of definition. What exactly is upcycling? According to Wikipedia, upcycling, also known as creative reuse, is the process of transforming byproducts, waste materials, useless or unwanted products into new materials or products perceived to be of greater quality, such as artistic value or environmental value. So you're taking waste, trash, old or broken objects and do something new and better with those. In the definition itself, you have the idea of being environmentally aware. Instead of adding to the excessive waste caused by humanity, you repurpose it into something better. In a way, you don't add waste to the world, you transform it into something that is not wasteful and that is meant to be kept. Upcycling is not only reserved to what you would commonly think of as trash, but it also encompasses objects that have served their purpose or are not wanted anymore. That can include anything from books to clothes through furniture. Think of backyard sales or thrift stores. Often they are filled with random objects that will likely find no use or be bought for fun and end up in the trash anyway. Old plastic containers, kitschy items, moldy looking items. If you've ever been to a thrift store, you know there's so much stuff at such a low price that it's impossible for every object to find use again. I find these stores to be very inspiring, as you always end up finding something completely unexpected that can lend a great story onward. But you can also find objects at your own home, in your basement, or ask your friends if they are decluttering. Decluttering is a bit of a trend these days and probably slightly over the top. I'm not sure you have to declutter at that scale, but it also means that there are plenty of things for you that you can easily gather and turn into art. Word of advice though, don't make it too much of a habit and transform into a hoarder. I would suggest keeping one box of random objects in trash at all times for your work, but not more, unless you have a huge project idea, of course, that requires a lot of waste or items. Installations can be very demanding in terms of materials, so that's a bit of a difference. Also, this is going to sound very obvious, but don't forget to thoroughly clean your items because, gross. Now, you can use any object of your liking in your art, however, there are a few things to note. First, every object has inherent signification. You might not care about those, but people will know these and interpret those when reading your art, so whether you want it or not is not really up to debate. Each object has a cultural symbolism that is proper to each society, so when you are using certain objects, you have to be aware of said symbolism. I mean, you can, of course, don't act upon it or openly state that it's not about it. But the thing is, when you do art, ultimately, art doesn't belong to the artist once it's finished. It belongs to its public and will be open to interpretation. You might have written an essay for each of your artwork, but people will still see things that you might not have anticipated. For instance, Barbie dolls are heavy with cultural meaning. They represent fashion and capitalism, but also for a very long time unrealistic body image. When using a Barbie doll, you integrate these notions into your artwork. You might have a different opinion about them, and that's fine. I mean, I used to play with them, and honestly, I never saw them as body dolls. I just saw them as dolls, really. And I had more fun making their houses and making food for them than anything else. But the Barbie doll is still a representation of many things that are currently not working in our society. Hyperconsumption, vanity, and fast fashion. But they're also a representation of women, so you can turn this around and use that symbolism in your work. I vividly remember an artist using dolls to talk about domestic violence. It was brutal, it was really well done. What I'm trying to get at is that objects are rarely neutral, but that's also what makes them so interesting. So if meaning is important to you and you are trying to convey a specific message, then using adequate objects will serve your purpose. That being said, upcycled art doesn't have to be filled with meaning and not even about the environmental crisis we are living. That's of course my take on it, but it can also still be purely decorative. You don't even have to state that you are doing upcycled art. When describing your work materials, many use the short term mixed media, because it's a lot easier than enumerating everything that you used, and it enables you to remain silent on your materials. Upcycling then becomes a pragmatic choice. You need paper? Well then, why not use those old letters or envelopes that were going to be trashed? Not for their symbolism, but just because they're made out of paper. You need plastic for water or glass, then why not clean and use that plastic waste? Miniature artists actually use a lot of reclaimed materials to imitate life in miniature, but they don't always load their work with meaning in the process. Sculpting is already tricky enough, so using everyday objects or trash that you might encounter can really help. The idea is to see what surrounds you with an artist's eye, imagining how you could use certain objects differently for a very specific result. And while many mixed media artists buy new materials to use them in a distorted way, in upcycling, the idea is to use old things that you might want to throw away or objects you find or thrift. The core of upcycling is really to reduce the amount of materials you buy and rather use what you have, but simply use it creatively. Another crucial point is to ponder about the shelf life of the materials you're using. Unless you are working on something ephemeral like installations, art is supposed to last at least a few decades, so keep that in mind as well when scouting through garbage. Now this is a bit of a controversial topic, but as I have upcycled my own work a few times, I want to open the thought process to you. If you have been doing art for a longer period of time, you might have realized that your view on some of the things you did a few years ago has, well, changed. Suddenly they look terrible and all you want is to throw them away or hide them somewhere under a rock so you have never ever to see them again. And now, while I really understand the sentiment, I think you need to try to be objective about certain things. Are these pieces an essential step in your art career? As in, did they help you to grow or evolve in a specific direction? Then you want to keep them. But are we talking about just one single piece that explains your evolution? Or is it a series? And if it is a series, maybe one of it is really good, but a few are really bad, maybe even broken. If you have pieces that are not meaningful in the grand scheme of things, neither to you nor for an eventual posterity, you can always deconstruct them and re-inject them in newer pieces. You can, of course, erase your past work completely. If you are a painter, you can simply gesso the hell out of your canvas and paint again on top of misshapen artwork. I think most artists have been there. You can see that sometimes in the news where you discover a painting under a painting. So it's a very common thing to do. Again, I would like to insist on the fact that you don't want to do that to all of your artworks. You want to keep a certain trace of your evolution of an artist, not just out of arrogance thinking you might be super known or famous at some time and for posterity, but also simply for yourself. I think it's really important to be able to see your own progress and to learn from it. But during that progress, a lot of artwork that we do, it's just not good, it's not really meaningful, and it doesn't really help. And I'm talking about that artwork. And so from my perspective and art statement, I like to re-inject the shapes and essence of old artworks into my new ones, because it adds even another layer of meaning. Not only am I upcycling trash, I am also upcycling my artwork into something new. Lastly, a very nice bonus is constraint. In a world where your imagination is the limit, having the limitation of one or several objects can really spark your creativity. It's the same as how certain artists will intentionally add random colors, doodles or stickers in a fresh sketchbook, so they only have to react to whatever is already there. You are creating some random things in your artworks and you just react to it. When you upcycle objects, you have to react to these objects creatively. Often items are naturally charged with their own stories, and just seeing an item can spark an idea for a whole artwork. You can't have the blank page syndrome, as your page isn't blank to begin with. So this is what I had to say in today's video. Feel free to add to the discussion in the comments below if you feel so inclined. I'm sure I forgot a lot of things, and I didn't touch every aspect of upcycled art. There are so many artists that have their own twists of upcycled art. I will try to add a few links below to show you the work of other artists that I think are good at doing upcycled art, and they have their very own personal view. Please don't copy them, that's really not the point. It's more to get your brain thinking on how you could approach upcycled art if, again, it's something that you might be interested in. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, share, the usual drill. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!